Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Gregory showed up at Vanessa's parents' house thinking that night would be special. Their 8th wedding anniversary wasn't just another date on the calendar, it was a milestone he was proud to celebrate. Vanessa had planned an intimate dinner with their closest family, something warm and thoughtful, meant to strengthen bonds and remember good times. The table was set, conversations mixed with the clinking of cutlery, and there was a sense of familiarity in the air that felt comforting. Gregory greeted everyone, exchanged a few words with Helen and Frank, parents-in-law who'd always treated him with kindness, and sat down between toasts. The dinner was going smoothly until Gregory's phone buzzed. A work call, quick, but one he needed to take. He stood up and stepped into the garden, where the voice on the other end sounded distant amid the muffled noise of the conversation inside. As he spoke, his eyes almost automatically drifted toward the kitchen window. What he saw froze every thought in place. There, between the counter and the stove, Vanessa and Julian were standing too close. Her cousin leaned in and touched his lips to hers in a brief but intense kiss, like it carried a whole story behind it. It wasn't a careless slip or a joke, it was deliberate, full of meaning. The shock hit instantly. Gregory felt like the air had been ripped out of his chest. He gripped the phone tighter, pretending he was still in the middle of the call, while his whole body tried to process what his eyes had just seen. His mind scrambled for quick explanations, maybe he'd misread it, maybe it was a gesture taken the wrong way, but the image was already burned in sharp and clear, leaving no room for doubt. There was no mistaking it. It was the kind of moment that creates an invisible crack, deep and lasting, in the place where trust used to be. Up until that point, Gregory had been certain about his marriage. Sure, they had disagreements like any couple, but he believed the foundation was still solid. And even if he'd ever imagined facing betrayal, it never crossed his mind it would come from within his own family. Julian had always seemed harmless, an introspective artist, almost detached from other people's dramas. Seeing the two of them like that felt like discovering a hidden crack in the house you've lived in for years, one that had always been there, silent, until the day the structure finally starts to give way right before your eyes. Gregory didn't react. He stayed still, keeping a neutral expression like he was still focused on the call, but inside, he could feel something had broken. In seconds, the celebration lost its spark. That full table and the family laughter now felt like background noise to one single thought: something irreversible had just happened. He took a deep breath, ended the call, and stayed outside a little longer, as if he needed a few extra moments to pull himself together before going back in. When he walked back inside, he saw Vanessa chatting animatedly with her aunt, like nothing had happened. Julian was leaning against the wall, holding a glass, carefully avoiding eye contact. Gregory sat down quietly, only responding when someone spoke directly to him. He could feel the weight of the secret burning inside, while everyone around him carried on in the easy mood of a celebratory night. Every toast, every smile exchanged at the table, felt like a reminder that he was surrounded by people who had no idea what he'd just witnessed. The dinner went on, but for Gregory, the celebration had already become a turning point. It was the invisible end of something he'd believed was unshakable. Gregory and Vanessa's beginning had been marked by an intensity that felt indestructible. They'd reconnected years after college during a university event, and it was like all the time they'd spent apart had just been a pause leading up to that moment. Conversations flowed easily, there was humor, chemistry, a connection that didn't require effort. In the first months, it felt like they were living out a love story you only see in romantic movies. They traveled together, shared dreams, built small traditions that gave the sense they were building something real. The first years of marriage only strengthened that belief. They looked out for each other, celebrated small wins, and above all, there was trust. Gregory never felt threatened by Vanessa's friends or acquaintances. She, in turn, never questioned his friendships. It was as if mutual security was such a solid base that nothing could shake it. Over time, though, small changes began to appear. Vanessa started spending more hours at work, saying she was involved in new projects that demanded constant attention. Their nights together became rarer, and she preferred to go to bed early, claiming she needed to rest for the next day. Gregory, used to long talks with her before sleep, noticed that this space for intimacy was shrinking. Still, he tried to believe it was just a phase. It was during this time that Julian returned to town. Vanessa's cousin had always been quiet, almost mysterious. A visual artist, he spent long stretches traveling and rarely settled anywhere. His return coincided with this more distant phase in the marriage, and Gregory noticed the growing closeness between them happening gradually. At first, it seemed like just family affection. Julian started showing up for lunches, helped Vanessa with creative projects, and slowly, his presence became a regular thing. As months passed, Gregory began to notice signs that hadn't been there before. Glances that lasted longer than normal, smiles exchanged during quiet moments, conversations that stopped the second he entered the room. Certain gestures, a quick touch on the arm, a comment made in a low tone, seemed to carry a different weight. Still, Gregory chose to ignore them. Convincing himself he was overreacting was easier than facing the possibility that something was off. There were days when he came home and found Vanessa distracted, typing on her phone, then quickly changing the subject when he approached. Other times, she casually mentioned meeting Julian to discuss ideas or visit exhibitions. Everything always seemed so natural, as if there was nothing to question. Gregory tried to keep things normal, but a quiet unease began to settle in. It wasn't just her behavior that had changed, it was the rhythm of their relationship itself. The sense of closeness gave way to a more functional, almost routine kind of coexistence. He tried to reclaim time together, but there was always a reason to delay: commitments, tiredness, different priorities. Even so, until the night of the dinner at his in-laws' house, he held on to the hope that their marriage could regain the spark it once had. The trust he'd always had in Vanessa was what kept him from confronting the small suspicions. For Gregory, admitting something was wrong meant accepting that the entire story they'd built over the years could have turned into something unrecognizable. And that was a possibility he wasn't ready to face. That same night, after the dinner at his in-laws' house ended and the last guests said goodbye, Gregory and Vanessa walked to the car in an almost uncomfortable silence. She seemed pleased with the evening, talking about how happy her parents had been and how everything had gone exactly as planned. Gregory responded briefly, trying to hide the storm of thoughts in his head. The image he'd seen through the kitchen window still burned in his mind, as if it had just happened seconds ago. The drive home was short, but long enough for him to replay every detail: the closeness, the quick kiss, the way Julian had looked at her. They got home, and as soon as they walked in, Vanessa took off her shoes, dropped her bag on the couch, and said she was going to take a shower before bed. Gregory stayed in the living room, sitting, staring at nothing in particular. The sound of her footsteps fading echoed like a reminder that there was now a gap between them, something that just hours ago he hadn't even known existed. That's when he noticed her phone on the cushion, screen facing up. A small detail, but it caught his attention because Vanessa always kept her phone close, almost like an extension of herself. Gregory hesitated for a few seconds, but the need to know the truth won out. He picked up the device and unlocked it. At the top of the message list was Julian's name. Just opening the conversation made the answers he'd feared jump out at him. The messages started casually, but quickly turned into intimate confessions. There were mentions of secret meetings, references to shared moments away from anyone's eyes, and obvious complicity. He skimmed through the words, feeling a mix of anger and coldness. One voice note caught his attention. He pressed play and heard Vanessa's voice say, "With him, I feel like I'm acting. With you, I breathe." The honesty in her words left no room for alternate interpretations. Gregory sat frozen, phone in hand, absorbing each syllable as if each one added more weight to his chest. He kept scrolling and found messages referring to short trips, always with excuses he now recognized as lies. He realized dates when Vanessa claimed she was overwhelmed with work lined up with times when he didn't know exactly where she'd been. Everything clicked into place, cruelly. Taking a deep breath, he started taking screenshots, saving each piece of evidence like part of a puzzle that was nearly complete. He transferred the files to a flash drive and placed the phone back exactly where it had been, careful not to leave any sign he'd touched it. He sat there for a few minutes, motionless, listening to the sound of the shower running in the bedroom. It wasn't just the discovery of betrayal that hit him, it was the clarity that this marriage, as he knew it, had already ended long before he realized it. The difference was now he knew. The night that started as a celebration had become the marker of an ending. And as he stood up to go to bed, he knew from that point on, every word, every gesture, every decision would be guided by that truth. Gregory heard the shower stop and, a moment later, the bathroom door open. Vanessa appeared with wet hair, wrapped in a robe, looking relaxed, as if the night had just been another happy family moment. He watched her for a few seconds, holding back the urge to explode. He wanted every word to come out with the clarity and weight the situation demanded. "I saw you two in the kitchen," he said, voice steady. Vanessa froze mid-motion, sitting on the edge of the bed, frowning. "What are you talking about?" "You and Julian. The kiss. And before you make up some story, I've already heard the messages too." Silence filled the room. She looked away, gripping the belt of her robe tightly, as if that could give her control. "It wasn't what it looked like," she started, but her own expression already showed it was exactly what it looked like. Gregory picked up the flash drive from the nightstand and played one of the audio clips. Her voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the room. "With him, I feel like I'm acting. With you, I breathe." Vanessa closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if accepting there was no way back. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally said, "Fine, it's true. I got involved with him. But you have to promise not to tell my family. It would ruin Julian's image, Anne." Gregory cut her off, laughing in disbelief. "Julian's image? That's what you're worried about? What about mine? Do you have any idea how I felt? You think about him, but not for 1 second do you think about what you did to me. You're so immature you think protecting your cousin is more important than owning up to what you've done." She tried to say something, but Gregory didn't let her. "Fine. I won't say anything. Not because he deserves it, but because I refuse to be part of this perfect family act you two are putting on. But you're leaving this house tonight. Figure out where you're going to stay." Vanessa's face tensed, as if she'd expected a second chance, but realized there was no room for negotiation. Without arguing, she stood up, opened the closet, and started packing clothes into a suitcase. The sound of hangers, zippers, and doors closing felt like a ritual of closure. In minutes, she was already holding her bags. She walked to the living room, grabbed her purse and car keys. Gregory stayed still, saying nothing more. When she opened the door, he noticed there was no regret in her eyes, just the urgency to leave. Vanessa went downstairs and got into the car. The engine started, and the red taillights disappeared around the corner. Gregory knew exactly where she was headed. As soon as morning came, Gregory called the lawyer a friend had recommended. He laid out the facts plainly, attached the screenshots, asked about the process, and listened carefully to each step: legal separation, initial petition, deadlines, court dates. He wanted speed and clarity. He authorized everything by email and transferred the power of attorney. When he hung up, he felt a calm that didn't come from hope, but from resolution. This story had an expiration date. In the next 2 days, Vanessa left Julian's place and went back to her parents' house. Gregory's phone rang. It was Frank. "Gregory, Vanessa's here." "What happened?" His father-in-law's voice carried concern and a hint of authority, the kind he used when he wanted to take control. "When did she get there, Frank?" "Today," he replied, short. "That's strange. She left the house a few days ago." "Do me a favor? Ask her where she's been." Actually, ask Julian where she's been. On the other end, silence lasted long enough to set the whole family's blood boiling. Frank took a deep breath. Don't say something so absurd. They're cousins. How dare you suggest such a thing? I respect you, Frank. I always have, Gregory said firmly. But I won't let you disrespect me. I saw what I saw. And I have proof. The call ended. It wasn't a polite goodbye, it was a cut. Gregory stared at the screen for a few seconds, Frank's photo still lit up, as if his image were there to remind him the story was no longer private, it was now family business. He opened the family group chat on his phone. The avatar showed a Christmas photo, everyone smiling. He typed one sentence, to avoid misunderstandings, I'm sharing this. Then he attached, the audio of Vanessa saying she acted with him but breathed with Julian, the screenshots with dates, replies, subtle invitations, enough of a sequence to leave no doubt. His phone didn't stop vibrating. First came the, from aunts and cousins who didn't understand the context. Then Vanessa's call appeared on the screen. Gregory answered. How could you? Her voice was full of anger. How dare you expose this? Have you lost your mind? I was accused of making things up, he replied calmly. I figured it was better if everyone heard it in your own voice. You've destroyed the family, she shouted. This was between us. Between us ended the night you chose Julian. The rest is just consequence. You're cruel. Vanessa fired back, trying to turn her guilt into a weapon. I only asked you to protect his image. Did you have to humiliate everyone? Your concern has always been his image, Gregory cut in. I'm not going to argue. He ended the call, went back to the group, and tapped leave. The silence that followed tasted like both an ending and relief. Minutes later, Frank sent a private message, I need to talk to you. Gregory read it and left it unanswered. The phone lit up again, a voice note from Frank, short and direct, his voice choked. I've already spoken to Vanessa. You were right. I'm sorry for what I said before. Gregory listened to the end. He didn't reply. It wasn't about revenge, it was survival. He'd just broken away from an entire life. Responding now would only reopen a minefield. That night, the lawyer confirmed the case had been filed. The process was underway. Vanessa, shaken in front of her family, decided to stay at her parents' house. Internal family conversations exploded. Helen tried to comfort her daughter while also trying to understand how this had happened. Uncles and cousins were divided, some wanted silence, others demanded truth. Julian, pressured by stares and questions he could no longer avoid, chose the easiest and most cowardly path, to disappear for a while. He left the group chats, stopped showing up, and stopped replying to messages he'd once initiated. The weight of the family name, once a shield, had become an anchor. Days turned into weeks. Vanessa's lawyer tried to delay things with formalities, but the evidence was strong and the outcomes predictable. Agreements that might have turned into battles in other marriages were settled on paper like wiping the table after dinner. The house, already in Gregory's name, bought before marriage, with archived documents and undisputed deed, stayed with him. Furniture was divided with almost accounting-like precision. Photos went into a box Gregory took to storage and locked. Not out of anger, but because some memories are like glass, the more you touch them, the more you cut yourself. The divorce went through without a dramatic court scene. A signature here, another there, seals, stamps, a quick video call with the judge. The relationship that began with big promises ended with cold formalities. Gregory ended the call, closed his laptop, and looked around the empty living room. The peace he felt wasn't excitement, it was space. A future could fit in there. Meanwhile, Julian collapsed under the invisible pressure his own family created. Frank, who had once said, "How dare you," now barely spoke to his nephew. Helen avoided crossing paths with him at family lunches. Some cousins even changed sides of the street. The atmosphere became unbearable. Within weeks, Julian announced he was leaving to pursue new projects in another city. He left without warm goodbyes. As he packed, he left behind what mattered most, the illusion that nothing would have consequences. Vanessa watched the fallout. She lost her marriage, and soon after, the emotional crutch that had kept her standing. She tried to start over in a reconfigured teenager's bedroom, boxes on the floor, visits carefully managed. Frank was strict but fair. Helen was loving but firm. With every conversation, a lesson emerged like an uncomfortable mirror: choices have prices. Saying, "It was just a mistake," doesn't undo the damage when the mistake becomes routine. Time moved on. A year passed. Gregory rebuilt simple habits. He started running early again, picked up a course he'd abandoned, took short trips without needing to tell anyone. He learned to cook a dish he'd always ordered out. He reconnected with friends he'd let drift away. And during one of these casual meetups, he met Melissa. Quick laugh, easy conversation, zero interest in drama. They started slow, careful, knowing that rushing ruins what's real. Gradually, their relationship took shape. No banners, no announcements, something good was there, and that was enough. One Saturday afternoon, Gregory and Melissa decided to take a walk in the park. They walked hand in hand, chatting about light things, planning a movie for the night, the kind of conversation that doesn't take effort. A little ahead, Vanessa sat on a bench with a coffee cup. She was waiting for a friend who was late. Chance did the rest. When she looked up, she saw Gregory. She also saw the woman beside him. She saw the ease between them. Her heart jumped, the kind of jolt that comes just before guilt sets in. Gregory didn't see her. He kept talking, paused to watch a dog playing with a boy, laughed at something Melissa whispered in his ear. Vanessa watched the scene with a tightness rising from her stomach to her throat. There was no shout, no excuse that fit that moment. All that came was a sharp, cutting question echoing inside her: how could I have done this? She stayed there, frozen, as Gregory and Melissa slowly walked away, wrapped in the ordinary afternoon that two people build when they've learned to value the simple things. For a moment, Vanessa thought about standing up and calling his name, just to hear her own voice remind her what it felt like to be near him. She didn't. She gripped her cup tightly, her eyes filled with tears, and the question returned, harsh and final, with no relief: how could I have done this? Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.